Hello there YouTube, Devin here again. Today for this very Canadian video, I'm wearing traditional Canadian garb here. The other acceptable Canadian garb would be a jean shirt and a jean jacket. I went for the buffalo check plaid flannel shirt, obviously, because today we're talking about one of my favorite helmets, the Canadian CG634. I have one here. This is the old gen. We'll get over what is the difference between the old gen and the new gen, but first we're going to get into kind of the whole background of the CG634, and I have a ton of helmets and different parts and everything sitting here in front of me to easily grab and access them for you, so I hopefully don't have to edit as much. This is the Gen 1 CG634. This is a helmet that came out in the 90s and serves with Canada until this very day. There's two versions of the CG634. There's one made by CGF in Canada, and then there's one made by MSA in the United States. They do also have a factory in Canada, though. This is the old gen. It has the old gen CAD pat on it, or what's known as the relish camouflage to a lot of people. CAD pat is a very effective, very near and dear to my heart camouflage pattern, and this is a fantastic helmet. Now, there's really only one difference between the first gen CG634 and the second gen CG634. That's this black rubber rim on the helmet. Other than that, they're made out of Spectra. There are newer ones made out of Kevlar, though. Some of the MSA ones, later ones, are made out of Kevlar. That is documented. Spectra is basically Kevlar. It's just a slightly different thing, so they could put a patent on it. So that Honeywell is who developed Spectra, could put a patent on it. Other than that, this is a hybrid design helmet liner. It has a 3-point chin strap, and as you can see there, it is a hybrid design of styrofoam pads, like foam pads, and suspension. This is one of the first helmets to actually have that, and it's fairly comfortable. It breathes quite well. It works well in a wide range of temperature environments, which Canada experiences every year. They experience actually quite hot summers and incredibly cold winters, as most of you probably think of when you think of Canada, the incredibly rich Arctic tundra that covers most of the country. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. But there is some substantially cold winters in Canada. So we will get over here now, looking into a second gen CG634. And we'll see what that looks like here. But quickly, I will remove the cover off of this one here. And the cover is easy to remove in these helmets because they aren't actually held on by anything. They're held on by tension, tension alone. They don't have a drawstring. They don't have anything interesting like that going on with them. They're just held in place with these plastic tabs that you tuck up underneath the liner. All right, so here are those plastic tabs that you see. They're just little plastic tabs sewn on, and these literally just slide up between the liner and the shell on the inside of the helmet, and that's all that holds on the liner. And then there's this big one in the front that kind of tucks up under the little bit of a bill. This is the old gen CAD pat. You can tell because it's white on the inside. It's not meant to be reversible. It's just white on the inside. And then in this little flap back here, underneath is a extra piece of fabric that folds down to protect your neck from the sun and the wind, and you could tuck it into your uniform, and it helps you prevent from getting sunburn and stuff like that, or windburn from the winter in chill. So, but that is what the helmet cover looks like, and this is what the Canadian CG634 looks like without its cover. As you can see, it's pretty much heavily influenced on the Pasgat. It's very egg-shaped. It's very round and bulbous. It has huge ears on it, and at the time that this helmet was designed, that's how big comms were. Were this big. You needed this much space for comms underneath your helmet. It's not really necessary nowadays, but it's still just a holdover because they have the molds done for this helmet. There's a slight bill to protect the kind of nose and eyebrow and keep crap and debris out of the eyes on this helmet. That is a carryover from the Pasgat. This is a in-house Canadian designed helmet. Canada tested a lot of designs, as we'll see, and this helmet actually replaced another composite design. This wasn't Canada's first composite helmet. There was another one before this. But before we get into that, we'll show you what a Gen 2 CG634 is. Now, this is one with the Desert CAD pat cover on it, as you can see, and the later KDEX helmet mount. There would be an earlier version of the night vision mount than this, but the only difference between A Gen 1 and a Gen 2 is who made them. And this one, you probably can't see it there, has a green hardened plastic rim, whereas this one has a black rubber rim. So this one, also you'll see here on the buckle, no markings. And on this one, you will see, if you remove the buckle, it says MSA, because the later ones are made by MSA, which is an American company. So, okay, so now we'll get into how the how the CG634 became this helmet, why this shape is the way it is, and all of that other stuff, and why it's so weird and different compared to a lot of other helmets. All right, so in the 80s and into the 90s, Canada is using M1 helmets. This is a early Canadian kind of test mass green helmet cover. Other than that, they would have used American Woodland. Most of the Canadian M1 helmets they received in the 60s and 70s were basically Vietnam era M1 style helmets. No different, actually. They were all made in America. All the liners were made in America. Some of the liners were repaired in Canada. They are undistinguishable from the American ones, though. They're all basically all Vietnam looking like M1 helmets with a woodland cover. They would later have a woodland cover. That's what Canada would standardize on, would be a green uniform and a woodland helmet cover for their M1. Okay. And into the 90s, they realized that they were quickly falling behind. In the 80s, the US adopted a Kevlar helmet. The French adopted a Kevlar helmet. You know, who is one of the countries that influences Canada would be France. The UK adopted a composite helmet in ballistic nylon in the 80s. So Canada was kind of lagging behind. Not really a country that was known for its military, and still isn't really known for its military prowess. They're not a very large military. They're a country that relies very heavily on trade and diplomacy, as well as being friends with a lot of other very powerful nations, such as the United States and the UK, to kind of aid them and help them in types of things. But Canada was a founding member of the United Nations. They were also a founding member of NATO, so they had contributions and stuff like that to these organizations and needed to keep a certain level of military readiness, it was judged, in order to be a feasible member and to basically hold their spot in those organizations. So in the 90s, a bunch of tests go out. They want to get a bunch of helmets from a bunch of different countries that they want to test. And some of the helmets they get Israeli Orlite helmets. Just like this. They would have been in a ballistic nylon pattern. They also tested fiberglass ones, the Canadians did. They also tested a few Kevlar ones. This is one of the ballistic nylon ones. They tested all of them. They really, really liked the Orlite helmet in testing. Another helmet they received, obviously from one of their big heavy influences, the British Mark VI helmet. This is a helmet made out of ballistic nylon by NP Aerospace in the UK. Canada really did not like this. They had a lot of problems with this helmet. If the liner became damaged, you had to junk the whole thing, and it was a huge pain to replace. They really didn't like that. And they didn't like how, at the time, body armor was very high collared. This helmet is totally flat in the back. It has a pretty deep skirt on it, so when going prone, it would rock forward and kind of blind the soldiers so they could not see very well, especially with the very high collars on body armor at the time. So this was a helmet design they really, really did not like. The next helmet they tested was the American Pazgat. This helmet doesn't have the liner in it, as you can tell, because it's kind of missing screws, but it has the chin strap, and they did okay. They thought this helmet, it tested very well ballistically, but they also really did not like this helmet. It tended to rock forward with the very high collared body armor, and it wasn't very stable. They didn't like this 2-point chin strap. It wasn't very stable at all, and that was a huge problem they had with the CG634, not the CG, with the American Pazgat, my bad. And then the last helmet they tested was a French design. Now this is the F2 helmet, and this is one of the exact versions they tested. It is a Spectra helmet, which is basically a aramid fiber developed by Honeywell, a specific mix of aramid fibers in a specific weave with a specific resin developed by Honeywell. Really the only difference between Spectra and Kevlar ballistically, not really anything. They offer the same protectorage. Spectra has a longer shelf life than Kevlar does. Kevlar breaks down in UV radiation, so when it's exposed to sunlight and stuff like that, but most helmets are painted, so that doesn't really matter, you know, and all that other good stuff. But Spectra has a longer shelf life than Kevlar. Kevlar does break down over time and everything like that, and with heavy use it breaks down faster than Spectra does. It doesn't really matter though. Most helmets are replaced. Most Kevlar helmets are replaced by the time the Kevlar would start to break down anyways. So, but it's something the Canadians really liked on paper, was that Spectra. This is the same exact shape as the Pasgat. They're basically made off the same mold. So the US Pasgat and the French F2 would have had the same exact shape and same exact level of protection. But what they really took away from the French F2 was the liner. As you can see here, the liner is very similar to what the CG634 would have. It is a suspension type liner backed with foam pads. And then they had a 3-point chin strap, which the Canadians really liked. And the reason the Canadians went with a suspension type liner rather than a pad type liner, like their older helmet, as we'll see in the CG634, is the fact that for different weather conditions, you can adjust the circumference of the liner very easily to fit winter weather gear underneath. So like wearing a winter hat underneath your helmet is something you need to do in Canada, where it's the land of almost always winter. And I hope you guys are getting a joke that it's not actually almost always winter. I mean, it is in some parts, but Canada's a very beautiful country. I don't want any Canadians actually coming at me, you know, being like, oh, it's actually summer some of the time and blah, blah, blah. So I hope you guys are getting that joke, that this is a joke, okay? People just think it's always winter there, and in some places it is, but not everywhere in Canada. Canada's the second largest country on Earth. They even have deserts and crap. So the best two helmets that the Canadians test in that 90s helmets trial are the Israeli Orlite and the French F2. Okay, so these kind of get petted to further testing, and they still really like the F2. They still really like the Orlite, and it looks like they're about to go purchase F2 helmets, is what it kind of sounds like. Kind of cut down versions of F2 helmets with not quite as high, not quite as low of a skirt, and a little bit less of a bill. And then this Canadian company, the company's name is Bardet, steps up, and this is one of those kind of national pride things that Canada had, like with the Ross rifle. You think they would have learned from the Ross rifle that the F2 helmet was, you know, pretty great. But this Canadian company, Bardet, comes up and they're like, do we really want France making our helmets and stuff like that? You know, do you really want to do this contract? I know your military's kind of small, but we're a home company, you know, so we can make them here, we can produce them here, we can design a hybrid design, exactly the shape you want, with all the features you want, and we can make it whatever you want it to be right here in Canada. And the Canadians are like, okay, that sounds pretty good, make one, and we'll test it against the Orlite and the F2. And so this is what they come up with. Now, this is actually a new or unused Bardet helmet, Gen 1. They're incredibly rare, and this one was rejected from the Canadian military because the paint hardened wrong on it, so it has flaky paint, unfortunately. And it's only like that in a few spots on the helmet. The paint's actually basically the same exact thing as a Pasgat. But this one had some hardening problems, so there's some spots where the paint has flaked off. But this is the Bardet helmet. Has a bill on it, has a huge dip down for the ears, a really wide channel for comms, as you can see, this big, huge ear space for comms, but also has a very high arch in the back skirt to go prone with. It has a 3-point, really complicated kind of suspension. And the liner in it, this is what's colloquially known as the hockey pad liner, because at the time, this is what hockey helmets had. It was just a kind of thin foam with puffier foam pads all the way around. This was not well liked. It tended to be kind of hard on soldiers' heads, and it didn't kind of fit everyone well. This one is in my size, the medium. And it wasn't well liked, so quickly the Bardet helmet went into production. The Canadians liked it, okay? So like, we like that home thing, but it turned out that it wasn't that great of a design with the liner. And so, but quickly they ended up putting a Pasgat style liner into the Bardet helmet. So if you know what the Pasgat style liner is, it's a lot like an M1 helmet liner. The Canadians were then like, well, why don't we just get Pasgat helmets? The US is willing to sell them to us for cheap as a close ally. You know, why are we basically making PASGAT helmets when we could do none of the work and get them for cheap? And then, so they're like, okay, well, we'll start up helmet trials again. Bardet's adopted and used, all right? They're actually used in conjunction with the CG634 and the M1s for a little while. Not a lot of them are made, but they are used. They are formally adopted. And then quickly withdrawn from service once they develop the CG634. So in the time the Canadians are using the Bardet helmet and finding out they really don't like it, and maybe they should do helmet trials again, Gillet, which is the company that is making the F2 in France, sets up a factory in Canada. And they're like, we can make you F2s now, the helmet that you wanted initially, and we can make them in Canada, made by Canadians with supplies here in Canada for Canada. We could do that for you. And they're like, that sounds fantastic. But now we realize we really don't like that kind of PASGAT style of shape and everything. Can we get a new design? Can we work in conjunction with you? If we give you the contract to make the helmet, can we work in conjunction with you to design a new helmet entirely? And CGF Gillet goes, sure, why not? And then this is what they come up with. It's a combination. It kind of takes some tips from the Bardet. They shorten that bill a little bit. Still has the big ear flaps. Has a cut in the skirt, a relief cut in the skirt that's not quite as high as the Bardet's, but still pretty high for the times. And it has that kind of lower profile design that the Orlite has, and that kind of egg shape that the Orlite has, but with features of the F2 that they like. Primarily, as you can see, the 3-point chin strap, albeit wildly overcomplicated because Canada wanted that for some reason, but the liner is pretty much exactly the same. Now this helmet liner would go on to still serve with the CG634. Now rather than removing this liner, because this liner is held in place with 3 screws, I actually have one that is outside of the helmet to show you what it looks like. This is what a brand new CG634 liner looks like. Now this is in a size medium. This was made in 2008. This liner was. This is currently in service. Now this is the part that would be in the crown of the helmet. This is your, it's just a piece of hard styrofoam. That's all it really is. You can even tell that it's styrofoam. And this sits on top of the liner and suspension to help prevent trauma from above. This is going to help give the helmet some extra rigidity while it deforms, because it's actually very hard styrofoam and resin. And that's going to also cushion substantial blows to the helmet when it deforms from shots or shrapnel or anything. The suspension is still adjustable for winter helmets, winter gear and stuff like that. And as you can see, it is a leather and kind of cotton polyester blend type suspension, adjustable here at the crown via this drawstring right here. And then that is all held in place around a series of a circumference band that is backed with these foam pads, as you can see through this clear plastic liner, to also reduce impact trauma from the outside of the helmet being transferred into the head. And then that is all held in place by this clear plastic band that actually screws to the shell. So these, 3 little screw holes, there's one here on either side at kind of the temple region, and then there's one here in the back. All right, that the chin strap also connects to those holes. So this is a very easy helmet, modular to remove parts from. And it doesn't have the complicated problem that the F2 has, that the French were using at the time. Now the F2, if we bring it back here, their liner is held in place. If I can get it to go here, okay. Their liner is held in place with snaps. The female end there is riveted directly through the shell, as you can see. But the problem with snaps is they wear out over time as you remove the liners and stuff like that, and that's a hard thing to replace. Screws are a very easy thing to make and reuse as they kind of wear out or get lost. If a soldier pulls too hard on the F2 liner, they could easily rip that female end of the screw right out of the shell, the female end of the snap right off the shell, and you could easily pull one of those eyelets through the liner or something like that. So the Canadians were like, okay, well, we're just gonna have a liner that's held in place and a chin strap that's held in place with 3 screws. Okay, so the liner is adjustable for height with this drawstring, like I said, and it's adjustable for circumference. Here at the back, there's a Velcro strap that overlaps, kind of like in a PASGAT, so you could adjust it for circumference. The problem with this is, unlike the French design, where they offset these bands that hold the sweatband in place. This one right here in the front of the forehead caused a lot of irritation to Canadian soldiers. So if you look here at the F2, theirs are offset. So right in the center of your forehead is just leather. It's not as bad. But that became a pressure point for the liner, the suspension system, especially if you had a lot of stuff on the back of your helmet, like a battery pack for night vision or something, or even a lot of stuff in the front that caused your helmet to rock forward and kind of press that liner into your forehead. You would see a lot of Canadian soldiers purposely route this chin strap over this band, which would compromise the ability of the helmet to protect you, because the suspension would be loose and it could cause the helmet to move around too much and not be secure. But if they did leave it running through that little channel, with all the stuff on your helmet or wearing it for long periods of time, you would get this little red mark in the center of your forehead that was very kind of painful after a while. But you have to wear the helmet for quite a long time or have a lot of stuff on it in order for that to happen. Another problem with the CG634 is these adjustment tabs. These tabs are just plastic. They don't have any little hooks or anything on them. A lot of soldiers would modify their chin straps by putting safety pins through them or sewing Velcro onto them or something like that, because they would tend to adjust on the fly, especially as the straps wore out or the chin strap became filled with sweat or something like that. While you were running or doing something or anything, your helmet would actually just start to adjust to the point where it could practically fall off of your head. And that's been documented before, because these little plastic tension clips don't have a lot of friction holding them in place, but that's the only thing holding the straps together is friction, but they don't really have a high friction surface on those little clamps to keep them from adjusting. So that's a problem the CG634 had, was that it would tend to adjust on the fly. That quite hasn't been corrected yet. The Canadians have had a substantial amount of testing to try to replace it, but it turns out that the CG634 is okay enough to work. Overseas, as I have witnessed and many other soldiers can attest to in the Canadian military, they have gone to the point where they will entirely remove the suspension and put Velcro discs and ACH pads into their helmet, like a US ACH or an American ECH, you know. They have those pillows in them. That was very common to do. While not technically allowed due to Canadian doctrine, it was something they would do more frequently than a lot of people seem to think, because of that whole comfort factor and the fact that the liner could so easily break. This plastic shell here could break quite easily. The liner could tear. The foam pads would fall out after a while as your sweat would kind of get into the glue, and the foam pads would fall out and the chin strap would adjust. You'd see a lot of safety pins holding Canadian chin straps to keep them from adjusting, and it wasn't too uncommon to see them with pads on the inside. I actually have one with the pads that I just didn't bring here on camera. That's something that I kind of did custom. But that is kind of the long story behind the CG634. Alrighty, so here I'm going to show you what all the liners kind of looked like compared to the CG634. So we'll get that in camera right here, and that way I could lay them out for you guys and you could see where the CG634 kind of took some of its influences from. So I'll turn it around this way so you can see the whole chin strap and everything like that. So this would be the CG634, the Gen 1. Now this is what it was technically replacing, was the M1. So don't mind all the pads, but this is the kind of suspension, the M1, and don't mind the chin strap either, but it would have had the same suspension and the same sweatband as this helmet. Pretty much, as you can see, it's kind of an upgraded version of this, but this is what the Canadians have been using for the last, basically 30 years at this point, before they adopted the CG634 over there. And so now I'll show you the helmets that the next helmet here that they kind of went to and tested as a comparison. All right, now here we have the British Mark VI ballistic nylon helmet next to the Gen 1 Spectra CG634. You can see where the Canadians might not have liked this helmet. It wasn't incredibly laterally stable. As you can see here, it has a much lower skirt. It comes up much further in the back than the CG634 does, and it ends up being biting into the soldier's neck a little too often. This also, these very, very narrow straps and this one little kind of donut ring worked kind of like the American Pasgat, as most Canadian soldiers did not have hair, as is military standard. These ended up, that little ring kind of ended up digging into the soldier's head and creating a lot of discomfort. So this helmet, while not very comfortable and not very stable, also ended up being to where if one part of the liner goes wrong, it was a real pain to replace. And especially if the liner became damaged, the only thing holding it in place was a bunch of Velcro and these two little plugs that stuck through the shell. So you would have to basically grind off these plugs without hoping to damage the shell in order to drop in a new liner, which was just too much of a pain, the Canadians thought, to equip their military. So we'll move on to the next helmet now to compare. Alright, so now here next to the CG634, we have the Orlite helmet, the Israeli Orlite helmet. Now this helmet here was also a derivative of the M1. So the Israelis went from an M1 to the Orlite as well. So you can see the influence in the liner style there, as well as they wanted a 3-point chin strap, much like the Canadians. They were in a lot of the same boat as the Canadians when they were looking for they wanted kind of a lower profile design that offered a good amount of coverage, but was lightweight, more stability, and had good adjustability and breathability for different climates they were fighting in. So that's probably why the Canadians took a lot of influence and really liked this helmet design compared to a lot of others. So we'll move on to the next one here. Alright, so this helmet here now is the French F2 Spectre helmet next to the Canadian Gen 1 CG634 Spectre helmet. You can see a lot of the similarities here as far as the kind of deep skirt, the ear cutouts. This has a slightly lower skirt than the CG634 does. The CG634 has a higher skirt to help with the body armor. The CG634 has less of a build than the F2 here, but you see a lot of similarities. The liner is very much the same, at least very heavily influenced. You can see a lot of the leather-covered pads, the adjustable tongues, the crown pad that routes through all these different straps that come up from the shell, in the liner. Now the sweatband that runs through the little channels, just like the CG634, the 3-point chin strap, the rubber rim on their helmet and all that other stuff. You can see the influence in the CG630 of the F2 in the CG634 for sure. So now I'm not going to show the Pasgat. The Pasgat's basically the same as the CG634, but with a less cool liner in it. And I don't actually have a Pasgat that has the correct Pasgat liner in it right now. Unfortunately, I recently sold some of those. And the other one I have just has literally everything you could possibly do to a Pasgat on it, and I don't want to spend an hour taking it apart. So now we'll move on to the next helmet comparison. Alrighty, now here we are with the two only Canadian composite helmets in history that were actually used. We have the Bardet next to the Gen 1 CG634. Now this is the early version of the Bardet with the hockey pad helmet liner and the complicated chin strap. This helmet, you don't see a ton of influence in the CG634 from, but it actually does have some, and it's in the form of that hard styrofoam liner that's at the crown. It worked just like that in the CG634. That's the only really transfer over that they have from the CG634 to the from the Bardet to the CG634 is that kind of styrofoam impact lining that they have. Other than that, it wasn't a really well-liked helmet. It was too complicated to produce, had a lot of problems and stuff like that. But it's still a Canadian helmet, and it's probably the rarest one out there today, would be the Bardet. So now we'll go into wrapping up the video here after this. Alrighty, so I hope you guys learned something about the CG634, or maybe about some of its influences in history, or a lot of the troubles that it's had compared to a lot of other helmets here today in this video. I have a pretty good smattering of everything to show you that led up to the history of this kind of mediocre helmet, to be honest. I still love it to death, don't get me wrong. It's probably my favorite helmet I own in my collection, to the point where I own like 5 of them. I have a lot of them. And I like Canadian history so much and everything like that. Go figure, right? So hopefully you all thought this video was cool. I even brought down my converted Gen 2 CG634 that has the nice Oregon Aero pads in it, still the 3-point chin strap, the nice seamless woodland cover, the K-Dex helmet mount. This is an awesome helmet right here. This is my go-to, actually, if anything really happens. I like it that much, how the chin strap is. chin strap is modified with Velcro to be a little bit more stable. So that helmet rocks now. But I really hope you guys learned something today about the CG634. I hope you can get one. Unfortunately, none of mine are for sale, but I really hope you guys quite enjoyed this video. You learned something. If you think I'm worth it, please give me a donation on Patreon. It goes a long ways to help me to get new camera equipment. I'm desperate for a new tripod. I unfortunately just bought a shotgun too, with how the way the world is, because I don't want to be shooting a neighbor accidentally because there's only 4 layers of sheetrock between me and them if I do need to actually defend myself. So I ended up buying a shotgun. So the Patreon money goes to help kind of relieve with that, as also has helped now that my funds are kind of hurting, go towards definitely new camera equipment and new subject matter and stuff like this. It also allows me to not have to work as much because I don't need as much money then. So that allows me to make more videos and everything for you. So I hope you all absolutely enjoyed this video and you liked my Canadian get-up and all my cool Canadian helmets and all their history. And thank you all for stopping by. Please like, share, subscribe, comment, all that other good stuff. It helps the algorithms, which helps me out a lot in the end, especially if you can't give a donation to the channel. It absolutely means the world to me. I wish I had my cool mustache still to help you out here. You'll have to settle for the rough beard. But thank you all for stopping by, and hopefully I can see you all in the next video.